I want to talk about this idea of persuasion. And the reason I want to talk specifically about persuasion is because it's like the ugly cousin of influence. Like, people like the word influence. It makes them feel kind of cozy, and it's like hygge, you know, right? Compared to persuasion, which sounds very direct and very, specifically intentional. And the reality is, what people really want, I found, when they talk about influence, is they want what I think of as persuasion. So let me give you a very big framework to start with, and why I think persuasion becomes so important. And you really want to add this to your vocabulary. If you don't have it in your vocabulary, if you think like influence is so much nicer than, more pleasant to do than persuasion, the big idea is that when we're working with people, whether we're managers, or we own and lead a company, or we're internal in some role where we have to accomplish something, or you're like me, you're an external consultant, or you're a coach or something of that nature, whatever the role is, where you're trying to accomplish something with other people, the reality is you need at least two things to happen. And these two things are the lifeblood of persuasion. The first one is you need to be able to arrive at what are called commitments. You need to get people to say yes to whatever it is that you want them to say yes to. Does that make sense as an idea? Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to get anyone to do anything if you don't have some level of commitment. And the second thing is you want what we call compliance. Compliance simply means that yes to the commitment doesn't mean it's getting done. It's like when I talk about decisions, there's that old joke that I use all the time, there's 10 birds on this high wire, and one decides to fly away. How many are left? 10. The one that decided to fly away didn't fly away, just decided to fly away, right? You have to have something happen. And compliance is where the rubber meets the road, as we say in the United States. It's where the thing itself happens. So the commitment is only one half of getting the outcome. The other half in getting the outcome with people is that they do the thing they say they're committed to doing. Does that make sense? Right? So when I'm working, for instance, even at the level of healthcare, and I've worked with physicians around this idea, the idea of compliance for a physician is very significant. It's very important for them. They need to be able to get their patients to follow through on the prescriptions and recommendations that they make about how to care for their health. They need to take the pills, or they need to eliminate something from their diet, or add something into their diet, or they need to get more exercise, or they need to sleep more, or whatever it is. If they don't do those things, they remain ill, or they get worse. So this compliance piece is really important. And the reason I'm talking about it this way is I want, if anybody in here, I don't know you personally, some of you I've met a number of times, some of you I know a little bit, but I don't know you on a personal level, and I don't know how you feel about these words. Because words have impact, words have power. They create a visceral responsiveness, a feeling in our bodies when we hear them that causes us to have a certain response to these words that are being used. Influence, persuasion, commitment, compliance. They create an experience when somebody thinks about those things, and especially when they think about doing those things with or to others. Right? And again, this is another set of those words that sometimes make people uncomfortable. To do persuasion with someone is an idea that some people will be comfortable with. To do persuasion to someone would make other people uncomfortable, or maybe some of those people uncomfortable. But yet there are times where you want to persuade someone. You have an intentional outcome that can only be realized if you're doing persuasion to someone, if you're getting them to move to a position that they don't hold to begin with, but for some reason or another would generate a mutually rewarding outcome. So as a framework, is that a reasonable place to start when I'm talking about this idea of persuasion? Right? And does it seem like if we could get there, it would have some value to you in a professional capacity, as well as in some cases on a personal capacity, right? So there's a difference here that I want to start from, though. I would say the reason this word, persuasion, gets such a bad rap, why it's the ugly cousin, as I call it, of influence, is because most of the time that persuasion has been talked about, and most of the ways that people have experienced it, even within their own life term, how it's happened to them, and maybe even how they use it themselves, is they use it in a way that I call violence. They're actually doing violent persuasion. And what I mean by violent persuasion is really a simple idea. And it is kind of ugly, in my opinion. Right? A lot of what we hear when we're listening to someone who's on a stage like I am, it's people like me like to come across like we're giving profound truths that come down from the cosmos that we channel through us and then present to you, right? When 99% of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is pure opinion. So everything that I'm saying to you, I want you to understand is an opinion. It's an opinion that has some experience to it. I have some background to it. I've done some of the work required to have an opinion that at least has some, you know, experience behind it, and that I've tested some of this stuff out, but it's just opinion. And the reason I say that this idea of violent persuasion to me is what you see often when you hear it, you learn it, you read it in books, you experience yourself, is because it's based upon what I'm saying is this very simple idea. The idea that we're going to manipulate someone emotionally to do what we want them to do. And when people understand persuasion to be that we're going to manipulate someone through the emotions they have about what we present and how we present it, so that they'll do what we want them to do, to me that's violence. That's an assault against someone. Right? Now, even in the kind of persuasion that I want to share with you, what I think of as nonviolent persuasion, there's an experience of tapping into that emotional reservoir that someone holds and using it, allowing it to come up and well in them in a way that moves them to want to make these commitments and to become compliant. But you're not doing it against them or to them for your benefit. Ideally, when it becomes nonviolent, it allows them through the entire process the option of choice. So when you start using emotions in a way that are violent, you begin to take people's choice away. You begin to now load the deck, so to speak. You begin to load the process so that what starts to happen is that they start to experience what I'm going to call some very negative things. So I want to talk neurology for a moment. Is that okay? Is that all right? You ready if I go a little scientific, geeky, nerdy on you for a few moments? All right. So our nervous systems are designed in common. Again, I don't know what the percentage is. Again, neurologists, neuroscientists, cognitive scientists like myself, we like to throw out these numbers like we know what the hell we're talking about. So let's call it 99.8% of our nervous systems are common. Everyone you're sitting with at these tables shares common features of their nervous system, right? There are variations in the way these nervous systems are wired up. But the components, the parts and pieces of them are generally common to the point we could say it's absolute. It's that close to one another. And we have a number of nervous systems that comprise the entirety of our nervous system. Right? The ones that I like to talk about, because we can access them and understand them together as a group, start with what I talk the enteric nervous system, this one that exists in our gut, literally. The neural tissue that's in your stomach, in your intestines, that runs through that part of your body and is connected to your brain, the part that everybody thinks where their thinking happens, through a very particular organ called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve lets your brain know what your stomach is thinking. What's interesting is a very large percentage of the transfer of information through the vagus nerve is upwards, not downwards. So the nerve is capable of transmitting information in both directions. Works perfectly fine to do that. But the vast majority of information is your stomach has a thought and tells your brain about it. Okay? And that system is really old. Older than the cortical system, the one that's up here. What's interesting about that is there's some research that's being done now. Some very respected neuroscientists, people that I actually like to follow and pay attention to, are suggesting this possibility that your brain developed in service to your enteric nervous system, to the brain in your belly. That's its function, is to carry out to some extent the secondary commands of what you know in your gut to be true about the experience that you're having. Now, one of the things that this nerve does is it controls a response mechanism that we call the autonomic nervous system. We have something that is now being referred to as the vagal response, referring to this vagus nerve. And the vagal response, one of its functions is it splits this response that you can have to the world into the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, or the autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic. These are two different ways your body is organized to respond at a very physical level. So the sympathetic nervous system is designed to come into action, to take over when you're under threat or stress. It basically goes, stop. We don't need any more information. We don't want to know anything else. We're now under threat. Got to get the hell out. That's what it does. And you know this as the fight or flight syndrome. I'm now confronted with something. I have two choices. I can either attack or I can avoid. I can approach or I can avoid. By the way, this function of approach and avoid is common down to the level of amoebas. So when you're in this function, for some level of reality, you're kind of operating like an amoeba. Right? So think of that, little squishy. That's what's going on. Your brain's been taken over by a protozoan level of thought. Now, I can induce that in you if I understand the right signals to offer, the right stimulus to provide. Okay? In fact, there's a whole art to it called horror film making. Horror films are designed to provoke that response in you, and they do it really well. Right? That kind of shit. A lot of people who are involved in the art of persuasion use those skills. If you don't do it now, the 50% offer is going away. You've all probably been to websites where there's a counter ticking down how much time you have left to hit the buy button. This is violent persuasion. It's designed to get you to go to that sympathetic level of response where you're thinking like an amoeba. And therefore, you're not thinking. You're trying to get out of the situation. And what they do, if they've done it really well, and you study the art of how to persuade in this way, is they make sure that what they're going to do is provide a container, a context within which it becomes very difficult to escape without taking the action that's being presented to you. In other words, it's easier to do the thing that's being suggested than it is to resist and do something else. And that relieves the stress, that relieves the pressure. You've fundamentally been like kind of emotionally raped. That's what's going on there. The parasympathetic has a whole different function. The parasympathetic system must be in place. It must be the operational system when you're doing something as simple as digesting food. In the sympathetic, your digestion shuts off. The system is like under threat. There's no ability to devote any energy, any physical resources to anything except get the hell out of the threat situation by killing what threatens you or getting away from it, by running away from it. It's the saber-toothed cat, right? When you're facing a saber-toothed cat, you don't want to be digesting food. You want all of the blood resources, all of the muscular resources, all of the intellectual resources available to you to either kill it or get away from it. That's what you need to do. Does that make sense? You don't have any room left for anything else when you're under threat like that. And these systems are hundreds of thousands or millions of years old. And they're designed to deal with that level of threat. All threat to the fundamental system, this vagal system I'm referring to, is that level of threat. If I don't buy this car, I can't get to work. If I can't get to work, I can't earn a living. If I can't earn a living, I can't buy food. If I don't have food, I will die. That's what your brain is doing. When you're sitting there in the office of the guy who wants to sell you a car and he's manipulated these emotional responses. The parasympathetic goes, the system's now available. The system's now online again. It can do things for you. You can do things with it. As simple as I say, as digestion. That's one of the things that it allows to happen. Your body goes into kind of a calm response structure. It's also where creativity begins to emerge. Okay? You can't have sexual arousal unless you're in the parasympathetic. Your body won't work. Okay? So all of these things are beginning to now make sense when I think about persuasion against some very fundamental neurological, biological functions. And what I want to do is I want to work with people inside of this parasympathetic paradigm. I want to work with people when they are calm. They're capable of making choices for themselves. They're capable of being creative in the kind of choices they're going to make. And this is incredibly, on my part, selfish. It's not altruistic. It's not that I like any of you. It's that I want to get the shit that I want to get to happen the way I want it to happen. And compliance happens way, way, way better in the parasympathetic than it does in the sympathetic. Commitment is easy to generate in the sympathetic. It's easy to generate when you feel like if you don't take action right now and do something, something horrible will happen, either right now or in your immediate future. But it doesn't necessarily mean tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and feel good about that decision. It doesn't necessarily mean a week from now or a month from now or a year from now you're going to be following through on that decision because it serves you and it's what you really want to be doing. What I want more than commitment is I want compliance. I want to be engaged with people, whether they're my customers or they're employees or they're partners or they're my spouse or they're my child or my whatever it is, whoever I'm engaging with, I want to engage with them in a way where this compliance piece is in their control. They've made the choice consciously and creatively. And one of the things that begins to happen when I can persuade in that way is, in addition to getting the commitment and the compliance that I want, creativity comes online, as I said. And now all of a sudden, what I thought was the options that I had available to move with people towards become bigger than they could have been by me alone. They start contributing to the outcome. I start getting comments like, what if, or how about, or could we do this? Or did you ever think about it like this? Because now creativity is online. And this shifts the conversations that I'm having. And I think this idea of persuasion, the way I'm presenting it to you, is so fundamental to who and what we are as creatures, as beings, that you really want to begin to understand the markers for what I'm calling violent and nonviolent persuasion, because it's happening all the time. You know, some of you, I'm sure, have on occasion picked up a real magazine with paper and pages in it, right? Not just the stuff online. And if you look at any of the most profitable magazines, the ones that are really earning for the publishers, the first third of the magazine is advertising, especially if you're looking at fashion magazines or food magazines or lifestyle magazines. You look at health and exercise magazines, about a third of the magazine is advertising. That's designed to persuade you. If you don't have killer abs, why do you even take up space on the planet? Right? How could you possibly be in one of these chairs in this room without killer abs? Right? My 79-95 pills, if you take them 3 times a day, will make you look like this guy over here. Right? Not the 20 freaking years of sit-ups he's been doing, but my pills. And so on and so forth. Shaping the conversation endlessly. Okay? We had this, I don't know, what shall I call it? Circus is too kind. Cacophony of insanity that just overtook the country I come from, the United States of America, for the last few weeks. Right? And it's called the midterm elections. And people get all worked up about the midterm elections, like something really significant is going to happen. And it did. The Republicans lost the House. Now the Democrats control the House under a Republican president. And, you know, this has been like the buildup for a month in the United States. You probably heard about it even over here. The midterms were going to happen. Trump was going to lose control of, you know, the Congress. Like, this is a big thing. Every president, pretty much since Harry Truman in World War II, in the midterms, lost the House. Happens all the time. People elect somebody, 2 years later they're going, wait a second, this isn't working out so good. I didn't think it was going to be like this. I thought there'd be 2 chickens in every pot and a car in the garage. Right? I got a chicken in the garage, you know, and my car looks like the pot I'm going to cook them in. We got to change. Get those guys out, put the new guys in, they'll make everything better. It's been going on for, I don't know, 25,000 years, right? Whatever the language was they were talking about. Get the old guy out, put the new guy in, because he's going to make everything better. Now, except we also have women there. Because that was going to change everything too. Once the patriarch was destroyed and women were allowed to vote and be in office, everything was going to change. It's the same stuff over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it's honed to such a spectacular degree of precision, it's virtually invisible. It's at every level. And what's fascinating is we're now living in a world of big data. You know the term? Anybody not know the term big data? The collection of massive amounts of information that are then filtered and sorted through so they can pick up trends and information from within that data that point to something. One of the folks that I have done some work with, he's a neuroscientist, a real neuroscientist, not like me. He like looks at cells through microscopes and stuff. Is actually of the firm belief, not just like a talking point, because he's a guy you'll never see. He's hidden in some laboratory somewhere. But for him, the idea that Facebook knows more about what you're likely to do tomorrow than you do is an absolute. If you're on Facebook, he believes Facebook could predict your actions for the next day, week, month better than you can yourself. So he knows if they present something to you based upon that profile, backed up by this big data resource that says people who have this kind of profile with these particulars, when they're presented with this information, are likely to respond in this way, is more accurate than what you would say about what you'll do when you're presented with that situation. Which means, of course, that it can be manipulated. Now, the thing that's interesting about this idea of persuasion, where I'm saying persuasion is like the killer app, and I'm using this phrase from the world of technology or, you know, technoscience, because this is what's going on. Persuasion is being engineered and manufactured at a level that's been unprecedented in human history. In part because so many of the things that we share now are being shared in common across such a large percentage of the population. The fact that you probably, some of you at least, maybe not all of you, but some of you knew that the United States was going through the midterm election is stunning. The fact that that's in your consciousness at all is stunning. How many of you growing up knew there was a midterm election in the United States? Even knew that it existed. Forget about when it happened or who was going to be affected or what the outcome might be. But now I'm going to guess, just by a raise of hands, how many of you heard this term over the last month, the midterm elections? Just take a look in the room. The majority of people in this room. But growing up, you didn't even know there was such a thing. If you don't think you're being manipulated by the fact that that's become important enough for you to even recognize when I use the phrase what it is, you're missing a large point of what I'm offering here today as I stand in front of you. If you want control of your mind, if you want control of how you think and what you think about, you need to understand a massive amount of the data that's coming into you is designed to manipulate you violently, to hold positions and take positions that are engineered for you to have. You think you're thinking, And you are, but they're somebody else's thoughts. If you want to have your own thoughts, the first thing you must do is accept that premise. Some significant portion of what I think is not my thinking. And it's been happening from the time I left the womb. I use this exercise all the time. I know I'm getting out of frame. Sorry, guys. Why'd you do that? Oh, you thought it, didn't you? You thought you made a choice just now, didn't you? You didn't make a choice. Because that's what one does. When someone goes like this, that's what one does. It's programmed. It's in his head, it's in his muscles, it's in his gut. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing it because I do the same things. I'm aware, though, that this has been programmed into me, and I accept it as part of the enculturation. What I do, that's what one does. Right? What do you do when somebody puts a plate of spaghetti in front of you? You pick up a fork, maybe you pick up a spoon, maybe you twirl it and put it in your mouth. You don't shove your face into the plate, do you? Which, by the way, can be much more efficient and at the right temperature can be wonderful. So you begin to understand so much of what we're doing has been programmed in. We don't even recognize we're operating off programs that are deeply embedded. So how do we ever get back to creativity? How do we ever get back to the idea of having a thought? Let's not even call it original. Original is way too much. Let's talk about it at least as considered and conscious. To have a conscious thought again, where you know you're thinking about what you're thinking about. Where you recognize, I'm shaking his hand, and I know I'm about to shake his hand, and I know I'm doing it because it's been programmed into me, and I'm going to do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do in this circumstance. That's different than the automatic response. Right? And what's going to happen is you're going to begin to recognize, if you did this, if you took on this task, you would begin to recognize before the thought is present, there's a sensational experience in your bodies. You're going to have some kind of feelings that begin to emerge within you. And very simply, they're going to feel good or bad, just at a very, very simple level. You're going to be compelled to move towards things or away from them. But in this case, you have a choice about whether you do it or not. When you're in the sympathetic, you have no choice. The movement towards or away from is happening before you realize it is happening. When you're in the creative space, you're still going to be moving towards or away from, but under some degree of your own choice. And you can change the options. This is the most important thing. Right? One of the things I heard after the 2016 election in the United States, when Donald Trump was elected president, was I had no choice. It was either her or him. There were at least 4 other people on the ballot. But we've been trained to believe that only the Republicans and the Democrats are worth voting for because any other vote is a wasted vote. What brilliant frickin' programming is that? How brilliant is that if you're a Republican or a Democrat? To convince an entire nation of 300 million plus people that if they don't do either or of the 2 things that you give them, and when you have only 2 things, you have no choice. You're in a dilemma. You're on the horns of the bull. Right? That's all you can do. You can choose this or that. That's, any of you are familiar with this NLP thing, this hypnosis thing we talk about. Milton Erickson's choice. Would you like to sit in this chair or that chair to go into hypnosis? Sounds like a choice, ain't no choice. Would you like this idiot or that idiot as your present? It's not a choice. Right? So these other people, they didn't exist as far as the voters were concerned. Because people felt they had no choice. I don't want to waste my vote. So I'll vote for somebody I don't want in office, that I don't like, that I don't respect, that I think is a criminal or a crook, but I had no choice. Right? By the way, I can talk about this freely because I'm an American, but I've watched the elections around the world, and we ain't unique. So creativity now changes the game. It fundamentally changes the rule sets that you're being presented with. I'll give you a quick example. Years ago, I do training, I do this kind of stuff. I've been doing this for many, many years. And in the late 90s, I had run a couple of programs, and this one guy showed up to 3 or 4 programs with me. And at some point, he was traveling through the area, and he called me up. He found my phone number and called me. And he said, I'm going to be in the area. Let's get together for coffee. And I said to him, why do you think we're friends? And he was very insulted. Folks, I'm happy you're here. I hope you get some value from what I'm saying. With few exceptions in the room, people who actually are my friends, you ain't my friends. You're not getting invited to my family parties. I'm not coming to yours if you invite me. I'd have to bring a gift or some wine or something. I don't want to do that. I don't know you that well. I don't know if I like you. Right? We're not friends. So I knew that I was being manipulated. He liked what I had to say. He wanted to spend time with me. He wanted to pick my brain. He wanted free consulting. So I said to him, are we friends? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, if we're friends, I have certain rules for my friends. He said, what kind of rules? I went, well, the first rule is if I need something, anytime, day or night, I call you and you pick up the phone. If you're really my friend and you see it's me, you pick up the phone and then you go, what do you need and how soon do you need it? He said, what? I said, yeah, that's the people are my friends. My relationship with them is such that either way, anytime, day or night, the phone rings, we see it's them, we pick it up, we go, what do you need and when do you need it? Now, sometimes that might be 3 o'clock in the morning and I need you to come over to the house with a shovel because I got something to bury. So he's like, are you kidding me? I went, no, I'm not kidding you. I said, you're calling me for a reason. You know and I know we're not friends. So the idea we're going to have coffee together and hang out and we're going to chit-chat about our kids is not what's going to happen. You're going to be asking me questions about the stuff that I talked about that you're interested in. He goes, yeah, sure, yeah, okay. I went, then you're going to pay me. I do this for a living. If we're friends, bring a shovel. Otherwise, bring money. Those are your choices. So I understand that what I'm doing in that conversation, and that's, by the way, it's a real conversation. What I'm doing in that conversation is I'm setting up a premise that's outside of the normal realm of choice. For him, the choice was not there for me to be able to reset the ground. For me, the choice is always there when I'm operating creatively to set the ground. Now, I don't always operate creatively. I'm as fucked up as everybody else on the planet, right? But there are moments where I can access this creativity, where I can get to this parasympathetic position where my system comes to rest. I'm not feeling the stress or the threat of the moment. Okay? Give you another quick little comment and then we'll begin to bring it to a close. And that is, I was standing outside, just whatever it was, 20 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. And Charlie, who's come with me, know Charlie for a long time, he's actually one of the people in the room who is a friend of mine. Charlie would bring a shovel. Said to me, Henrik, give me the signal, you're gonna get ready, you're gonna go on in a few minutes, what am I supposed to do? What does that mean? What is that? I don't even understand that comment. Like the fact that I'm gonna come out here and talk to you, what am I gonna do? I don't have to, either I'm prepared last week to be here or I'm not. If I have to spend 20 minutes psyching myself up to come out here, you should have hired somebody else. So people have to go through these rituals to prepare themselves to be in their life. It's because they spend so much time in the sympathetic their systems are so stressed out for so many of their waking hours that the only way they can hope to access a level of performance that comes from being prepared and settled and ready is to exaggerate the sympathetic response. Is to drive themselves through an adrenaline rush to perform. See, I don't want to perform in the adrenaline rush. I said I was going to get a little geeky and nerdy. There's a bunch of chemicals involved in this, in what we call the sympathetic. The primary ones are called cortisol and adrenaline. They make you sweat and smell bad. You don't want that. People around you, they don't want that. Nobody wants to be next to somebody who's sweating and smelling bad. Trust me. Even my dog knows not to be next to you. These chemicals in the parasympathetic, when you're calm and you're creative, are primarily a balance, an incredibly finely tuned balance of serotonin, which at a certain level creates a sense of motivation or desire. But if you cross that level of serotonin uptake, it creates anxiety. So at the right level, it creates motivation, desire, and urgency to do something in a positive and productive way. And when you blend that with dopamine, you get hygge. You feel good, cozy, like you want to snuggle up to something, all warm and fuzzy, and you smell good. Dopamine smells good. Okay? So that's what begins to happen is you produce different chemicals. And you want those chemicals running through your brains when you're making significant decisions. So this is a talk. This is an Acuity talk. I'm not here to give you the neuroscience of how do we use persuasion to produce these chemicals that are going to lead to these states of calm creativity. But you want to understand, when you're working with someone, when you're persuading someone, you're either doing it violently and you're creating this adrenaline response, this sense of anxiety and discomfort and an urgency to release the stress and threat, or you're generating a sense of the balance between the serotonin and dopamine levels, which enhance this creativity and this calm a person feels. They start engaging with you around you, persuading them and feeling good about it. They look forward to you showing up to persuade them again about something. And this becomes an iterative cycle that feeds on itself. It's a cycle of satisfaction. And what we want to do is we want to become skillful, if we're going to take this idea further, if this was more than a talk, in how do we intentionally, with other people, begin to produce states where they can feel good, not just about what they're doing with us, not about making commitments and being in compliance, but about themselves having made a commitment and complying with it. Because they were fully present, you allowed them to show up, and then you stepped away in a way and went, it's yours. The decision is yours. Right? I like to say when I do my marketing, it's the last thing I'll tell you, that when I'm working with someone and I engage with them, I want them to feel this to be true. That at the end of what we're doing, they will know for sure what I'm offering. They will know what the choice is available to them. And either way, if they say yes or no, we'll shake hands and be friends. Not the kind that bring shovels, but... And I mean that. If I'm persuading in any other way, I go home not feeling good about myself. And if for no other reason, I want to be in this space of nonviolent persuasion, because when I wake up tomorrow morning, I want to feel good about the decision I helped you make. That's what this is about for me. So thanks for staying a little later, hanging out with me this afternoon. I hope some of this made sense, and I hope you leave smelling really good.